The shortest verse in the Bible. Jesus wept. I wonder if when they added the verses in and decided where the numbers were going to go, whether the people who did that decided that those two words were significant, were something that needed to stand out, something that we needed to hear. Jesus wept. And it's hard to know what's going on with Jesus. It says he's deeply moved. That's what the Greek word suggests. But we don't know why. We don't know what's going on in here. And so anything proposed is a theory, a possibility. And that's what I'm going to offer you now, and you can take it and think that might be true, or you can think it's absolute rubbish, and that's fine. Jesus is a man who's always known what he's about. From a very young age, he's been sure and confident of what he's here for, of what his calling is. And suddenly, in this moment, he's come before his friends who have begged him to be quick and hurry up because Lazarus is going to die. And he doesn't rush. He says, it'll be okay, don't worry about it. And then he gets there and he's greeted by Martha and by Mary at different occasions. And both of them say to him, Jesus, Lazarus is dead. And if you'd have just turned up on time, that wouldn't have happened. What if, for the very first time, Jesus suddenly has a small doubt in here of whether he's done the right thing? Whether he's suddenly, for a tiny second, a little bit unsure of himself. And the criticism and the sadness in his friends has caused him to feel overwhelmed and worried. And Jesus weeps. Like all humans do when they feel overwhelmed, when things are too much, when they suddenly doubt themselves. We believe in a God that came to earth as a human being and lived what we lived and experienced what we experienced and felt what we felt. And so it makes sense to me that if we're feeling moments of doubt and worry and anxiety, if we're feeling overwhelmed and struggling with the choices we've got to make and the decisions we've got to make, it totally makes sense that we have a Christ that went through that too. We are all for the 100% God. It gets complicated when we add in the 100% human. And we don't always know what to do with that, so often we discount it. But maybe there's something in there for us when we acknowledge it. Acknowledge it is there, that it is part of Jesus. And yet here's the thing. Even if that is Jesus, even if he does have those doubts, those worries, even if he is feeling overwhelmed, his value is not diminished. He doesn't become less than perfect. God doesn't lower his rank. Jesus does not become inferior. And if God says that about Jesus, then God says that about us. When we struggle, when we doubt, when we're anxious, when things are too much, doesn't mean we become less than what we are. We are not loved less. We are not less good. We are not ranked less. We are not an inferior person because of that. But this is what we tell ourselves. This is what society tells us. And so we as a church, as the church, have got to look at how we respond, how we acknowledge that. And there are some things that in the past we've done that we really have got to stop doing. Firstly, and I'll tell you this, I have always struggled with my mental health. Since I was a child, mental health has been a battle for as long as I can remember. I saw a school counsellor from about 10. I have been told that if my faith was stronger, that wouldn't happen. I will extol the Lord at all times. His praise will always be on my lips. My soul will boast in the Lord, that the afflicted hear and rejoice. Glorify the Lord with me. Let us exalt his name. The words of Psalm 34. And that doesn't change because I struggle with my mental health. So if you want to tell me that, you can do one. So we can't do that as the church. We also come into a difficult problem because there needs to be some recognition that sometimes our mental health battles can be destructive. They can hurt people. They can cause real problems. And we want to be compassionate and we want to be supportive to those that are struggling. But so often we can end up forgetting that there are victims. And they get forgotten and they get ignored. And they get left to fend for themselves while we're over here trying to take care of the perpetrator. And I'm not saying I have a solution for that because it's such a difficult balancing act. It's just something to be aware of as the church. And the best thing we can do as church, the way we can respond to that culture that says you're less, that says you're diminished because you're struggling, the way we battle that is that we create a church that is open. We become a church that allows people to be honest. That means we can come to any one of us and say, oh, I'm really struggling. I've got this going on and this going on, and it's too much. Oh, I'm suddenly having anxiety attacks. And I don't know where they come from, and I don't know what the source is yet, and I'm getting professional help, but I just need you to know that I am struggling. God can heal. Yeah. And it's great. And we have a God, and we believe that God can heal us. And we shouldn't let go of that, and we shouldn't ignore that, and we shouldn't forget that. And at the same time, we have to recognize that sometimes that doesn't happen like that. That life doesn't work out that way. And that's okay to acknowledge that. And still hold the other thing that nothing is impossible. That God can do anything. We have to hold those two balances. We need to be a church that doesn't necessarily want to fix. Because we can't. We are not fixers because we're Christians. That's not how it works. We don't come to faith and suddenly we can solve everyone's problems. We can be a church that listens. We can be a church that creates a spirit of trust and honesty amongst one another. We can be a church that hears what someone says and says, these are the people you can talk to. And you can talk to me and I will listen, and it's rubbish. And I'm really sorry that you're going through this. And if we do that, if we become the best place we can be for those struggling, if we can become a place where people can cry out and be honest about what is going on with them, and if we can be a place that is supportive and loving in that, then hopefully the destructive parts of mental health can be avoided. Probably not totally, and we can't beat ourselves up when that doesn't happen. But it's our best solution to avoid those issues, maybe. So, I wonder where we are at with our mental health. And I wonder where we are at as members of a church and a congregation, how we feel our church is equipped. How as a church we feel we deal with this. Is it something we've talked about? Is it something we've acknowledged? That it is a part of life, a massive part of life. In the hope that we can have some space where we can be honest with one another, where we can trust one another. You've all got post-it notes and pens in your pews. If you need, if there's...
I've got one.
You've got one or you haven't got one?
No, I've got one.
Have you got a pen?
Yeah.
Fabulous. There's some post-it notes for you. And if you are struggling, or if you have ever struggled with your mental health in any way, and that can range. There's such a spectrum of what we're struggling. Anxiety, grief, depression, relationship struggles. I want you to write it down. You don't have to put your name on it. You might want to. You might have been waiting for an opportunity to cry out and say, I need help. And if you want to put your name on it, absolutely fine, but you don't have to. And I'm going to pass the baskets round, and we're going to put them in the baskets. And then I'm going to read some of them out. We're going to share this stuff. Now, I recognize that it can be hard to do this, so I'll go first. The last 3 weeks, I have been having anxiety attacks, which are not things I've ever had. Even in my struggles with mental health, it's not something that comes up. And yet, before a church council, which I can do no problem, I had one. And I sat in my office, and I wanted to hide, and I did not want to come out. And I did, and I came out, and I did the meeting, like I always do, and it was fine. But it came out of nowhere, and it has happened in other places in the last few weeks. And I don't tell you that for sympathy, and I don't tell you that because I want you to come and fix me. I've got appointments with a counsellor, and, I just tell you that so you know that's all right. And it's all right to feel what you feel, and it's all right to go through what you go through, and it's all right to share it. Because we, as a church, are a family. That's the point. The point is that we don't journey this life and faith thing on our own. We do it together. So we're going to play some music, spend some time praying, reflecting, thinking. Write something down if you wish, and then we'll pass the baskets around and share together. Anxiety. Overwhelmed, exhausted, and struggling. Fear of being judged. Sometimes difficult to give the right response. Grief, anxiety, and broken relationships. Peace. Missing my friends and my family. Not being strong enough to cope. Anxiety and panic. First thing in the mornings. Fear for our future. Friendship struggles, depression, finding purpose. What does God want of me? Most of us, maybe all of us, have written something. I'm going to put these out on a table in there, if that's okay with people. Does anyone object to that? Okay. And I invite you to read them. And let's recognize what a wonderfully messy bunch we are. But we are loved, totally and fully. We are valued. And none of this decreases that. And we are part of a family that is all going through stuff. And so let's support one another with honesty and love and openness, because that is how we be the best church we can be for one another.